It's a pleasure to be back at Berklee. I was here 85, 86, when it was really quite different. I was and am, of course, a guitar player. Always a guitar player once you've been one. So it was a long time ago. So I was a musician for about 12 years. I was marginally successful. I had a lot of fun. But in the 90s, I migrated to the internet because it was clear already then, the mid-90s, I was in San Francisco, that the internet was going to change the way that we do business. And so with contemporaries like Sean from Napster and Maggie from eBay and stuff, the whole thing in California just exploded. And ever since then, I've been doing stuff on the web, trying to combine what I know about music and content. I have a new company I started earlier this year called the Futurist Agency. And basically my working title has been for 10 years to work as a futurist, which is kind of a strange thing to say because of course nobody knows the future. But it's basically the idea of saying that you can develop foresight, which means not predicting stuff, but saying you understand where things will be 2 or 3 or 5 years from now. Because you can develop sort of a method of analyzing stuff, looking at stuff, understanding things, and helping people to do this. Here's my various connections. MediaFuturist.com is a website where you can download hundreds of hours of video, free video, PDFs, slideshows, and so on and so on. Twitter is Gerd Leonhard, and also Futurist Agency if you want to follow that as well. So this is really what I do. Describes pretty well. I just listen to what goes on. I have 2 kids, 16 and 21. I learn a lot from them. But basically I have a network of about 50,000 people, 15,000 on Twitter, a couple thousand on Facebook, a couple thousand on LinkedIn. And it's a global network of people who are developing ideas for the future. It sounds kind of hard, but it's actually quite easy when you get more skills of listening, which is of course a crucial skill as a musician anyway. But I develop ideas for my clients, so it's my clients are basically companies from all over the world. I live in Switzerland. I used to live in California, but I moved to Switzerland in the early 2002. And my clients are based all over the world. They're companies like Google, Nokia, DDB, Sony BMG, the BBC, many other, like 100 of different companies. And we work mostly in technology, content, entertainment. And as I'm sure you're aware of, that all of the entertainment business around the world is completely threatened and flattened to some degree by the advent of technology. And of course, the first wave of the internet has created a huge amount of opportunities and challenges, but now it's becoming mobile. Like, in Africa, India, Brazil, people will not be using computers to listen to music, right? They don't even have power in many of those places. It's mostly on the mobile. So we're developing scenarios for clients to help them basically get ready for the future. I've worked with all of the major labels except for Universal to try to help them, but it's a kind of a fruitless undertaking. I'm sure you've noticed that they're not entirely open to the message of change. But today's session is not about that stuff, even though that's a very interesting topic as well, and you can ask questions on that later as well. But it's about how to use the internet to actually create a career. Right? Whatever that career may entail, which it's kind of hard to say. One thing that's very important, of course, is the mobile. So I have an app called Media Futurist. If you have an iPhone or Android phone, you can download the app. It's free. You can watch my movies and check out what I'm doing. It's a very popular way to share stuff. By the way, if you're interested in an app as a musician or as an author or as a music department, there's a company called Mobile Roadie that I work with. And it's like a white label for apps. It's $500 for an app that you can make with your own content. It's like Typepad or Blogger for blogs, the same for apps. Very powerful way of getting an app out in 3 weeks. And very economic. So you'll see more of that in the future, but that's a good way of sort of branding yourself. This was me in 1993, playing a Telecaster. I had actually quite a good career as a musician. I played on cruise ships, I played in Las Vegas, I did about a dozen records. I got to hang out with Miles Davis a little bit, I had fun, but eventually got old. Because I felt like I wasn't really getting anywhere. So now my daily job is to help companies innovate. It's pretty much the same situation, except I don't get to wear the guitar, I'm still playing, of course, but I figured, after 15 years of playing literally 20 hours a day, I'm sure you know what that's like. I figured I was sort of like, okay, I can move on to the next level. So now I do a lot of training. This is a phone company called O2 in Germany, one of the big telephone operators. where I'm talking to them about the future of music and how they can help the music industry. So I do a lot of those kind of things, and I have a second book which is available for free called Music 2.0. If you have an iPad or an iPhone or whatever you've got, you can go to one place. It's called musicfutures.com. That's a mobile site. You can read on any phone, BlackBerry, Nokia, whatever you've got. Musicfutures.com is a mobile website. And this book, Music 2.0, is available at payingwithattention.com. That's a bit of a joke, you understand, because it's free. But you're paying with your attention. So if you go there, you can download a whole bunch of stuff, including this book, Music 2.0, which you can also buy on Amazon if you prefer the debt-free version. Okay. If you guys know SlideShare, anybody know SlideShare? SlideShare is a place where people who like to write stuff and present share their things. It's millions of smart people. It's absolutely the most amazing place to go for any sort of really knowledgeable presentation on pretty much any topic. So if you go to slideshare.net/G-Leonhard, like my name, you can download currently 92 presentations. Just don't print, okay? It's like 4,000 pages. So lots of stuff on the future of music, of social media, communications. This book here is my latest book called Friction is Fiction. That's also available on my bookstore, but I do have a free copy, one left. And for all of you, if you want a free PDF, you want one, I can see that, you can have it. There you go. So you want a free PDF, just Twitter or email me, okay? And I'll send you the free PDF link. It's not officially free, but it's de facto also free. So that's a collection of my stories. So just to kick off the conversation, we're going to do about 90 minutes or so, or 75 minutes of a monologue here, more or less, hopefully entertaining. But if you have an urgent question, just fire away. Okay, I'm recording a video for my own purposes, but I won't be able to hear you because I'm using a microphone. So, but you can still ask a question, and we're going to have debate and questions afterwards as well, of course. So I think you're extremely lucky, because when I grew up in the music business, there was no such thing as the internet. There was no mobile. There was making CDs and sending them out to get a gig. Right? And also, of course, the music industry was essentially 4 people around the world. Right? 4 people who run 4 companies. If you didn't have a deal with them, you just weren't going to go anywhere. So I went through all that stuff myself. Today, the industry still has 4 people and 4 companies, but there's lots and lots of new stuff happening. I call this Music 2.0. I think you're lucky for that reason, is you don't have to actually put up with a lot of the old thing anymore, because it's completely being reinvented. Music is moving into the cloud. You guys know what the cloud is? Cloud computing, right? It basically means that content, music, films, books are moving into a digital cloud where you can access what you own or what you're allowed to have through a mobile device, through a computer, through a TV, whatever it is. But music is no longer a physical product. I mean, it still is, of course, in many cases, but that's where it's going. Right? And that's very good news for you, because the physical product made most of the money for the people who made the product. The truck drivers, the printing press, the people making the design, the labels, of course. In the digital product, it's the music that counts much more than anything else. Right? For example, the New York Times, as a parallel, spends 80% of the entire budget on the process of printing. Printing trucks, printing presses, ink, the machines, the truck drivers. Right? In fact, the truck driver makes more money than the author. Right? When you think about that, you know, that's sort of a standard process. Right? 92% of all books are recycled without ever having been read. So that makes you really want to write a book, right? So in this situation, in a digital system, it's much better because the costs of publishing are very low. But of course, the challenge of getting attention is very high, which I will get to in the process. So you're lucky, I think, because there's a complete reset of the music business. It's painful. Clearly, it's painful to know that big companies will no longer really invest because they're running out of money. There's lots of legal disputes about who is supposed to do what and why. Nobody agrees on anything, and the music business has been like this for 15 years, ever since the first days of the internet. So, yes, you have a question?
I was just on what you're saying. I know that in 2013 they're going to change a lot of the Copyright Act, and a lot of the laws are going to change due to downloads. Okay, do you know a lot of that will get?
Well, they want to, but you know, Obama's track record on this, unfortunately, isn't very good. I mean, I was hoping to hear more from him about this, but But basically what's happening, of course, is that the music industry, which is largely companies that are not native in music, like Seagram's whiskey and and Warner, which is essentially the same, or Vivendi, which is a water company who owns Universal, and so on, right? They, of course, are not entirely happy with the switch to the cloud, right? Because selling products is much more profitable. Right? So I don't want to discuss copyright and those things too far, except to say that I think you're lucky because you're at the end of this period. Right? 12 years ago, we thought we were at the end of the period, but it's actually happening now. As you can see, for example, the most popular service right now in Europe, Spotify, Simfy, Moog from California, are essentially cloud-based models. So you pay or you accept ads, one of the two, like cable TV, to receive music. And in the process of receiving it, the costs are very low, but the engagement is very high. Right? So that's a good development. This is why I think, basically for you, the problem is not distribution, the problem is attention. Right? The problem used to be entirely about distribution. 15 years ago, if you didn't have distribution, you're not going to make any money. Distribution meant major record label, of course. Right? And whatever it meant, you had to have your records in stores or sell them at the gig or do something, right? It was all about distribution.
Isn't that just a change in mode of distribution? The problem used to be attention as well, but
yeah, both, yeah.
Without distribution. Now you have the distribution, but so does everybody else.
Yes, but of course there's no longer a problem with distribution, right? I mean, essentially, if the music is in the cloud, which that's where it's going, right? Then the only way is for you to monetize how people pay. That's another problem. But your music is going to be there, right? So your problem is not to get it into the cloud. It's already in the cloud as soon as you release it, right? The problem is how to make money. That's a different problem, right? But it's not the fact that you don't have distribution. It may be free, which is an issue, right? We have to talk about that. But now it's all about this. Basically, if you don't have an audience, right? If you don't have a brand, you'll never make any money. That's pretty much guaranteed, right? You can have perfect distribution, you can have a record deal, nobody likes you, nobody likes what you do, of course you won't make any money. Right? So money making is a consequence of attention, not the other way around. Right? That's a very important thing to remember. The first thing about what we call social media, which of course in the end is really a bad name for a really greatly simplified name, is to build an audience. And whether you're a songwriter or an engineer or an author or a company or a label, you have to have an audience. Okay? So if you're looking, for example, a recent example is Coke versus Pepsi. Okay? Pepsi has hugely gained an audience, even though, of course, it's exactly the same drink pretty much, right? But it's a historic fight between Coke and Pepsi. And what Pepsi has done is they've said, okay, we want to be friends with our consumers. So they have this website where they're pledging $20 million for the best ideas to improve society. I forget the name of it, but it's big. You should just Google Pepsi, Pepsi Award or something, right? And so you can post an idea that's good for society, whatever it is, and they give money away for people to execute the idea. So Pepsi has become a brand where people say, this is a cool brand. They have this video, much like Old Spice. You've seen the video with Old Spice, those kind of things, right? And all of a sudden, Pepsi has become cooler than Coke, right? And really gained market share because they're getting more attention. So a similar lesson here, I think, applies to music. But let's ask a really quick question. Who here is a blogger? Anybody here blogging? Talking about what they do? Yeah? Okay. Good. Who's on Twitter? Okay. Facebook? Of course, that's probably everyone. Yeah. Tumblr? Anyone? John Mayer's latest obsession, right? YouTube? Anybody on YouTube? Okay, great. And iPhones, of course, lots of iPhones, I'm sure. Okay, great. All right, so just sort of to get a read on things. Okay, let's start off with the right mindset. Thomas Edison, the inventor of the light bulb, right, probably the most crucial invention of those days, he says, I have not failed, I just found 10,000 ways that don't work. Okay, you have to start with this attitude. You're going to fail, you're going to make mistakes, you're going to try stuff that doesn't work, you're going to waste time, that's part of the process. It's exactly when you're a musician, you may have studied. Before I became a musician, I studied Hebrew. I was going to be a Lutheran minister, can you believe it? But in any case, I studied 2 years of Hebrew, Greek, and Latin, which was a complete waste. I never used it. I found many ways that didn't work for me. But that's just part of the process. So experimenting is part of the process. I'm not going to give you any recipes today that you can just stick on there, okay? It's not like this. Right? But let's ask the question before we proceed, what is this thing, social media? To a very, very large degree, it's a fad, obviously, right? Because like 5 years ago, every band said, we've got to be on MySpace. You know, MySpace is the future. And MySpace is now clearly the past. Well, in many ways it is, right? So it's no longer like the big obsession that it was then, right? So is social media the same thing? Is it sort of going to go by like this, right? Well, I think what we're seeing around the world is that basically social media is a sign for a whole new change of paradigm of how we do business, which is to connect, to network, and to be open. So I fished around on Wikipedia, where you go for the world's knowledge. Wikipedia says it's interactive forms of media, it's user interacting and publishing to each other, is publishing techniques, highly scalable publishing techniques, and it's user-generated content. By the way, this presentation will go up on my website, so you don't have to, you know, write everything down. You can download it in about 5 hours or so from mediafuturist.com. So that's Wikipedia, but basically, if you're looking at what it is not, I think that's easier to say what it's not, okay? It's not a way to pitch what you do and buy your stuff, okay? People don't want to hear from you on Facebook and say, now you can buy my record for, you know, it just came out, buy. Of course, that's part of the mix. Of course, when you do have a record, you tell them about it, but it's not about pitching, buying process. It's not about meeting strangers that you would never meet otherwise, or build a better mousetrap, right, or put a Band-Aid on a broken business. Right? In other words, if your music sucks, social media isn't going to make it any better. Okay? If you don't really want to talk to people, using Twitter will make that worse because you have to talk to them. Right? If you don't have any time to spend with your fans, being on Facebook is not going to fix that problem, right? Because you have to spend time with your fans. Right? Social media is a way of saying you want to have conversations. And conversations take some time, but I'll talk about the time issue later. But just as a side note, you know, the Google paradigm, I'm sure you've watched the rise of Google everything, you know, Google becoming a very, very powerful and very profitable company. Last month, $2.8 billion sold on Google AdWords. Google's paradigm is that 10% of the time of all employees have to be spent on stuff that's not about regular business. They have to waste 10% of their time investigating stuff, right? So all the Google places, I do some work with Google around the world, they have playrooms where you go in and there's all kinds of electronic equipment, there's all kinds of things, there's of course free food and all these things where you can experiment. 10% of the time is spent on what they call development of ideas. And Google has currently over 1,200 products in beta, which is an alpha actually, the trial versions, and over 365 products out on the web, from Google Talk to Google Gmail, the browser, to the documents and what have you. And that's how they innovate. So I think as a musician, producer, you know, in this field, you need to spend between 3 to 5% of your time on the experimenting and the process of connecting. That's the business time, right? That's the time that you need to spend on the same idea. So social media is not the magic wand where you can say, okay, you're going to be on Facebook, all of a sudden you get gigs or something. You know? It's not like that. Well, I'll show you some examples of what it could be. But here's my definition, Gerdopedia. Social media is digital communications based on two-way interaction. That's a huge difference. Television is one way, right? Somebody says you watch. You can email back or do something, but you can't talk back to the TV. Or in some cases now you can on IPTV. But the use of open platforms, self-publishing, and the sharing of content. Giving something to get something. Okay. That's sort of the definition of social media in my book. But be warned, of course, the web is not a rose garden. You're quite familiar with this, I'm sure, that again, it's not a place where you can just go and put something, right? The big issue is this of branding. How do you brand what you do? If you're an engineer, if you're a songwriter, if you invent instruments, or whatever you do, you've got to have some sort of brand. What do you stand for? Why people come to you? You know, whether you're a guitar player or a company, that's the same question. And then ask this question, now, who really is the brand in music? Is it these guys? Are those the brands of music, right? Or is it those guys? That's a KG band from Japan. You know, ultimately, it's really the musician who is the brand, right? It's not so much the company. Maybe some labels like ECM or others, you know, of course, they're also brands. But it's really about the musician. themselves. So here's some keywords about social media. First, it's about connecting, right? Making business and private and social connections with people who will support you. Now there's like 50 websites where you can raise money for things that you want to do. One of them is called Kickstarter. I'm doing my next book on Kickstarter. So Kickstarter allows people to give you a share, like $10, $20, $50, whatever, to contribute to creating a project together. So now there's hundreds of people raising between $10,000 and $50,000 using these platforms to create projects that are funded by the crowd, by your fans. Of course, you got to have fans for that, right? So that's, of course, a sort of a chicken and the egg scenario on this. But anyway, connecting, that's one of the things, is creating an open platform. This thing, of course, you see on every single web page now. Right? If you can get people to like you and say that they do, it creates a huge viral effect. Right? This is what the Facebook like button does. Okay? Now you can actually go to physical locations and like things. For example, in Israel, there's a fun park. You go to a fun park, you log into Facebook. When you come in, you get a bracelet. Okay, that has your username and password. It's called radio frequency identification. And you put on this bracelet, okay? And there's a button that says like, right? So when you go to the slide, of course you're wearing a bathing suit, obviously, but you still have the bracelet. So you're going down, you like the slide, you can hit the button. At the bottom of the slide, there's a booth, a little reader that reads your like, right? And on your Facebook page, the slide pops up and says you just liked the slide. All right, so it's a physical location that you can like on Facebook. Right? There's already festivals all over the world where the audience can say as they're listening whether they like the band or not as they're listening, right? Using these sort of mechanisms, or of course mobile phones. Right? So it's not just about websites. Right? This process will take off in concerts and so on with songs, for example. It's about real time. If you go to New York, you want to have sushi, you don't care what Google says about last year. Right? You go to search.twitter.com or wherever you go, or to Quip or whatever you've got on your mobile phone to find out what people said last week about the sushi restaurant. The same is true for music. People want to know what goes on now rather than what went on yesterday. The Twitter paradigm is the following paradigm. The following means that people keep track of what you do. So the key is not to yell at people and say, buy my record, even though they don't even know you. It's like proposing to get married on the first date. You know? So you have to get people to follow you first. You have to use the talk back on your website, mobile phones. And so a lot of people I talk to, especially if they're older, they're saying this is all kids' stuff. Right? But it's not true. The biggest growth on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube is people between 30 and 55. The biggest growth of all of that stuff is not you, it's not the kids by and large, it's not even people who pretend to be like kids like myself, right? But it's people who are actually already in there and learning how all that stuff works, that older people, by and large, older people. Here's a bit of a joke, which I found a couple days ago, which I thought was quite relevant here. Social media can be very confusing, right? This thing says, Twitter makes me like people I've never met, and Facebook makes me hate people I know in real life. Right? That's how a lot of people feel about social media. It's like, it's really confusing about what actually goes on here, you know. It's like meet 5,000 strangers and hate them or something, you know. So there's a lot of confusion about what it all does. And Facebook, of course, is getting into a lot of hot water on this issue of privacy and who's allowed to see what and all these things, right? So it's not always an easy issue. But the bottom line is, this kind of business, which I call the broadcast business, which essentially means that everything emanates from you, right? You're the sort of the broadcaster of everything, right? That is what I call the broadcast medium. That's, of course, radio, television, and so on. Big companies, big broadcasters is making way for this, what's called networked media. Twitter has about 78% of the entire Twitter traffic is not from Twitter.com. Right, is used by other websites who use the Twitter data to retweet or reuse it, like HootSuite and many other products. Right? It's called APIs, Application Platform Interfaces. So network media means that as soon as I like your band on using the like button, Somebody on my profile sees that I've liked you, they go to your profile, you listen, you like it, you tell you people, and it goes on like this, right? That is a network medium. And this is precisely why you're lucky, because you're growing up with this. I mean, you're getting into business when it's already here. I was here in this old business, right? I was here. If you weren't the big broadcaster, you just didn't exist. This is MTV, right? MTV is this, or used to be, rather. And this is YouTube, right? I mean, every single day, there's not a single day that goes by without dozens of people emailing me links on YouTube saying, you should watch this, right? That's what this is. The viral connected medium. There's 2.2 billion people on the internet now, on a global scale, 4.5 billion on cell phones. And all those 4.5 billion people are now moving on the phone onto the internet. So you can expect in the next 2 years, everybody with a phone is also on the internet. Okay. So the key is, how do you get those people to talk about you? Okay. Not because you're boring, or I mean, they're not going to talk about you because you're cheap. You know, record is cheap or free. You know, so what? You know, nobody cares if it's cheap or free. But what's good about you? Right? Why will people do this? Why will they recommend you? Right? Why will they like you? That's the key question. So the network medium, I think that's the challenge. The mission is finding and being found. And that mission really isn't any different than when Charlie Parker was a musician. Right? He had the same mission, of course. You know, in his case, being a genius makes it, of course, easier, right? But finding and being found is the whole art of success. You want to be found by the right people. So somebody makes a movie, they want to have you as a producer or make a soundtrack or sound effects, whatever it is. They have to know that you exist. How do they know that you exist? Right? They have to find you. And how are you found? Well, you're not found when you hide. So if you're already so good, like Rakuda or so, he can hide wherever he wants, people will ask him. Right? But the average person has to be sure that you are found. You have to present something, how you're being found. Right? It's like, think of it as a shopping window. Right? If you don't have a shopping window to show what you do, then nobody's going to look at the window. Right? Maybe at a certain point you can close down the window because it's already pretty well known, like John Mayer just shut down his Twitter feed, right? I think 2 months ago we had 3.6 million followers and decided to stop tweeting. He doesn't need this anymore in the same way that we do, and he's got an audience. Right? So that's the important part, and it all starts with this. It all starts with being open for connections. It all starts with giving away things also, because that generates the momentum. It doesn't start with you saying, well, if you like my music, you know, click on iTunes on the link, you know. Well, that's an obvious way to want to make money. But most people will not do that when they're not really convinced, right? Because it's a direct path to a transaction. So what we see now in business pretty much on a global level is that interaction comes before transaction. Right? Nobody will buy your concert ticket or your T-shirt, your DVD, or give you a contract without some sort of interaction. And that interaction has to happen in some way, in a physical way or in a digital way. It's a little bit cut off there. So there's 3 challenges. One is it's hard to be open. It's much better to be closed. I mean, quite simply, when we're closed, we have less risk, right? Because we don't have to have the risk of a weird conversation or wasting time. I mean, we can just be closed, and that's actually more proficient and also safer, but probably will not get us the audience. You know, Rupert Murdoch, the newspaper guy, is putting all of his newspapers behind what's called a paywall, right? I'm sure you've watched the conversation, right? So his newspapers will no longer be free on the web, because he figures that if people are getting all the stuff for free, they're not going to pay, right? So what's happened in England, where he has done this, is that the traffic of the Times, which is his newspaper in the UK, right, has shrunk by 78%. So people have stopped going to the newspaper because now you have to pay £1 a day to read it on the web. Right? So he figured he would close it because he can extract money from it. But what it has done is it create essentially a prison for his newspaper, because nobody's going in anymore. Right? But the Wall Street Journal, which is financial news, They can be behind the wall and people are paying the $200 a year because they have a real reason to pay. Right? So the question is, at what point will you charge people? At what point will you say it's no longer free? That's the key question. The question isn't black or white, will you get paid or not, right? That's not the question. The question is, at what point can you put up the toll booth? And it's very hard to make rules about this. So this is actually quite a complicated process now. So having conversations with your fans and what companies call customers, can take time. Take Dell Computers or JetBlue. They have, for example, now they have 25 people at JetBlue that do nothing but Twitter. They've taken the same 25 people from the corporate BS, the public relations and all this stuff that nobody wanted to see, and they moved them to Twitter. And now if you tweet and you say, I really hated the movie on the flight, they will respond to you and say, well, we're going to collect and see what other movies we should have. Right? They're actually using the conversation process to improve things. Right?
Virgin there, taking a little step forward.
Yeah.
People reading the tweets about them because they have internet on their flights.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody complains about service on Twitter during the flight, they will message the flight attendant to come and apologize during the same flight.
Yeah, that's kind of scary when you run a company, actually, because it seems like it would cause a lot of work there, right? But as a musician or producer, or if you're creating art, right, a lot of times you just don't have time for anything like this, right, because you're absorbed with your project. Okay, so there has to be a process of how you can run conversation. Okay, like in my case, I talk to a lot of people, but it doesn't take much time. Right, in average, my time spent talking to strangers in parentheses is like 1 hour a week. I mean, I have lots of small conversations sort of on the fly, right? But I don't sit there all day looking for people who want to talk, right? But the 1 hour I spend a week, those may be 100 different people. Those become like my biggest followers, right? And they're the ones who get me stuff that I will do for money, right? Because they're the ones who are multiplying the process, right? So you want to look for people who are going to multiply you, because you can't do all that work by yourself, right? You have to find people who will egg other people on. And then, of course, it's crucial, like I do with my books, it's crucial to offer stuff for free if you can find a way to then generate money down the road. Right? For example, it makes no sense to make all your music available for free when there's no mechanism to actually give you money. Right? In other words, you don't do gigs, right? You don't do soundtracks, right? You're not going to ever have a record. What's the point of giving the music away? I mean, you can do that, but it's not resulting in a consequence. Right? What you want is some sort of action in return. For example, now there's lots of bands and writers saying, if you tweet about me, I'll send you a link to a free download. Right? It's called Pay with a Tweet. There's actually a website called paywithatweet.com. Right? So basically what that means is, rather than paying the dollar on iTunes, you get the song for free, but you have to promote the artist. And that's the payment. Right? So we're going to see all these mechanisms, like on Facebook, for example. Facebook has launched 3 months ago Facebook Money. So you can have a currency, a Facebook dollar. And you can earn $1 when you do good work on Facebook, like reviewing a band, right? Or taking uploads from a concert and posting them to Facebook. You earn money on Facebook that you can then use to buy real stuff, including tickets, airline tickets. Right? And that's going to absolutely explode in the next few years. So again, you're lucky there, because we didn't have any virtual money, 20 years ago. And so very soon, for example, using your iPhone, you can go to a store and buy a coffee with the money that you've earned on Facebook. Right? That's definitely coming. I mean, that's already there in Sweden. You can do those things, but maybe pay your landlord with Facebook. I don't know. So look at this graph. Look, what happened here is that the traffic on the internet, whatever the internet is now, it's hard to define. It's mostly, in the US, where very much internet means computer, right? But everywhere else in the world, internet means mobile, because they don't have computers in the same way that we do here, right? So look at the traffic here that happened on Facebook. Now people are spending more time on Facebook than they spend on Google. This is not hits, it's time spent. Okay? Why do they spend more time on Facebook? Because it's social, right? It's your friends. Right? The most powerful marketing mechanism in the world is not running ads, right? It's word of mouth. It's your friends telling other friends, and them telling other friends, and so on, right? That's the process of viral marketing or word of mouth, right? That's what's happening here on Google versus Facebook, right? So Facebook will become a company equally as important and as big as Google, clearly. Facebook is infrastructure now, invented right up the street, of course. But, for example, I'm running ads on Facebook now, ads for my books, and the book is free. I'm giving away the book with a paid ad, which is kind of bizarre, but there is a strategy behind it, right? In that the people that I can find on Facebook, I can segment my ad. I can say I only want people who speak English in Turkey and Greece and Cyprus and South Africa, and they have to be between 18 and 24 or whatever it is. I can segment all the way down to 14 people if I want. I can't do that on Google. Right? So Facebook, you should try it out. It's a really interesting toy. When you go to Facebook, just hit the button, create an ad. That's what it says. Right? Then you can see, I'm spending $50 a month or so on Facebook, but it's a very, very powerful tool for marketing to a precise audience. So in many ways, you could say social is the new search. Now if I do a lot of work in Asia, so when you go to Jakarta, Indonesia or so, you want to go to a gig, you don't search. You bring up the app on the iPhone, whatever app you have, Quiet or TripAdvisor or whatever it is, and you type in music, and you see what people that you know have recommended what you can do tonight in Jakarta, right? And when you get there, you can still see them coming and going, right? You still see the same, it's like Foursquare, same idea, right? So social is becoming the new way that people find you. That's why you need the biggest network, not in terms of numbers, but in terms of quality possible. That's why you connect with people, because they will ultimately take care of your business. So there's a bit of a marketing spin on this one. Basically, a lot of companies have found is that they can own media, which is, of course, your web page or your app or whatever it is. You can buy media, which is Google AdWords or online ads, and you can earn media. Right? Earned media means people talk about you without you paying them. Earned media means they have a reason to recommend you for some reason. Right? Wikipedia is earned media. Right? Somebody posts something about them either because they hate you, or they want to put things clear, right? Or they have some sort of reason. So I have no idea who made my entry on Wikipedia. I don't know, well, I've been working on it lately, but before that I had no idea who did it. Right? And that's earned media basically means that people are talking about you and recommending you to others is the most powerful mechanism of how you get work. Right? That's very much the same that it was before the internet, of course, right? But now it's a whole different level. Right? So that becomes, of course, the hard part is that we have to give up control to get reach. Right? So that means, for example, in many ways you would say, okay, the music I have produced is available for free downloading. The concert recording may be available for free downloading because you're looking to increase the reach and have more people follow you or basically like what you do. At a certain point, you can turn it around. You can say, well, the concert recording is going to cost you $10 a year for all of them if you want, because you already have more reach. And then you can do what John Mayer does, which is to say, I have already got all the reach, so I can have all of the control as well. But most people will never get there. Right? Clearly, that's a tough place to go. That's basically a status that most people won't reach. So earned media is crucial to music bands because it's free. I mean, free in the sense of you don't have to pay for it, except for with time. So here's a graph showing how many companies in North America have acquired a customer from social media like LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. Look at the numbers, right? These are companies saying they have gotten a sale from Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn through a place where it used to be mostly kids. Now it's actually becoming what people are calling a social commerce, right? It's becoming a place where you can actually buy stuff. So it's all about this. It's all about attention and audience building. So I want to show you how I do it, because I figured that from what I've done, I've been on the web since 1993, really right at the time of the Netscape IPO, which was the biggest public offering ever in history. And I've tried a lot of different stuff. So I want to show you what I've done as a speaker and an author. This is my website, and my website, mediafuturist.com, is becoming actually the least important part, right? Because it's a website. You know? You've got to have a computer to see a website. You can't see it on a mobile in the same way. Right? But I still get about, about 2,000 people a day coming here browsing, because it's huge. It has like 3,000 blog postings. Right? It's ugly too, because I made it myself. It costs me $150 a year. But your website, of course, is still very important, right? Clearly. You can take a look at it, let me know if you have some ideas. Right? But what's more important now is this. This is my YouTube channel. Okay? This very video is going on YouTube as well. Of course, not in the entirety, because YouTube doesn't let me do this. But I also have a channel called GerdTube, which is a joke, right? But I bought the URL, people can find me. But YouTube has lots and lots of my videos. Some of them have 10,000, other ones have 3,000 or even 300. Some of them in German as well. But this is an extremely powerful place, because even if it's only 300 people watching this one video, one of those people is going to be somebody who runs a huge company, who's going to invite me to speak with a huge budget. And the same thing is true for musicians. You never know which booking agent is going to watch it or love it or hate it. But of course, the truth is, if I suck on this video, I lose the gig. Right? So don't put up anything that's really, I'm not in terms of production quality, but in terms of the message. Right? And that's also something you have to learn. It's not about the quality of production necessarily, even though that's an issue as well. But it's about the quality of the content. Well, what are you saying, and do you make a good point? Right? Here's my channel on Blip TV. Blip TV is a fantastic mechanism that's what's called over-the-top television. It's free, or it's $50 for the pro version. If you go to gerdtube.net, gerdtube.net, Blip TV has a great advantage over YouTube that allows you to connect to iTunes. So all the videos that you put up are downloadable through iTunes as a podcast. I've got about 85. Last month I had over 150,000 downloads on this channel. Right? It cost me nothing except for my pro badge now, which is $50. Right? I put up all my videos there, and lots of people are watching this on the iPhone. Right? And it generates audience. It doesn't, obviously, nobody pays for that, but I have a Tumblr blog I started, which is still kind of ugly. Here's my Facebook page. The Facebook page has absolutely exploded as a platform. Right? So I have people coming in who are following my stuff, and of course a lot of times I don't know who they are. Turns out that the CEO of Singapore Telecom is following me on Facebook, right? And he's a guy in charge of 158,000 people. Right? Of course, I never knew he was there to begin with. But he's keeping track of my stuff, and eventually he asked me to come and do some work with them. Right? So that's a process of what's called serendipity, which means that you accidentally discover things. Right? Very important part of what you do. LinkedIn, you guys are on LinkedIn, anyone? Okay. LinkedIn was started by a friend of mine in California, Ray Hoffman. I was number 2,000 on LinkedIn 7 years ago. Okay. When I started doing LinkedIn, people were saying, "Are you nuts? Why are you inviting me to this place to meet strangers?" It's like, this is, if we don't already know you, we certainly don't want to do business with you. That was 7 years ago. Today, 25 million people on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the most powerful professional network in the world. There's many others in different countries, like Zing in Germany and others, right? Where you can find people for business. You're looking for the CEO of a software company or somebody who makes mobile apps, you go fishing on LinkedIn. It's also free, and the pro version is rather expensive. It's like $20 a month. You can reach more people. So I got 2,600 people on LinkedIn, and whatever I need, I can find them here. So as a rule of thumb is, for those kind of services, don't connect with strangers. You can do that on Facebook if you want, but on LinkedIn I wouldn't recommend it. Keep it, once you water down your network, then it's hard to get it back up, right? So in general, of course, the rule of thumb is to say, be careful who you connect with, but don't be too uptight, right? So there's a sort of a middle position that I use. Like LinkedIn, I will not connect with people I haven't met. But all of you can add me to Facebook if you tell me that we met here inadvertently, or by the rule of audience today, then we can connect on Facebook, right? So that's how I keep it apart. This is my Twitter channel. I currently have about 15,000 something followers, but the numbers are utterly meaningless. I mean, if you're into counting numbers, then of course they're meaningful, right? There's like counting record sales or book sales, right? But it's really about who are you connected with, and are they responding? Are they retweeting your stuff? Do you have a brand? Right? I have 12 Twitter channels, but this is my main channel, Gerd Leonhard. With channel, I mean what I do there. Right? So my main channel, Gerd Leonhard, is a channel where I talk about the future of stuff. Mostly technology, media, content, art, culture. And I tweet stuff with lots of links. And people like that, and that's the format. So Twitter is great if you can find your format. You have to find a reason. Why are you doing this? Right? You have a reason, you stick with the reason, and then you can build an audience. Right? So you find the topic that you're tweeting about. You find stuff, a certain mechanism, like do you use links or not? Do you upload photos or not? And you should stick with that format to make it successful. I use a fantastic tool that's free called HootSuite, HootSuite, HootSuite. It's by far the best tool to deal with the noise of the social networks, right? Because what HootSuite does allows me, you see my Twitter names on top, Gerd Leonhard, Future Feed, Daily Wisdoms, those are my Twitter accounts. So I can go and it's like a dashboard for the conversations. I can quickly go in and out, make a comment, forward it, add people using this, right? So I spend about 10, 15 minutes on this a day, looking at the conversation. Right? Very simple and quick way of doing it. Right? It's also great if you use Facebook and LinkedIn. You can also have them on here. Right? Huh? TweetDeck is also a good app, but it's mostly for mobile phones, right, or for the iPad. Right? HootSuite is great on a browser because once you have it set up, you have it all in one place. So you don't have to skip around websites and stuff. I mean, it's a great tool to see what the conversation is like. I use a plugin on my Firefox. So if I read something interesting, I just pull up the tab and I hit tweet, and it just tweets it from the browser. I don't have to open a second window. Yeah? Huh? Delicious is a way of sharing bookmarks that used to be big. No longer really is, but 10 years ago. Anyway, there's many of these things, but the bottom line is I don't have much time, just like you. I do write books or other things, so I don't want to spend all day doing these things. So it's very important to have good tools. Mobile phone is crucial, because when you're in the taxi, you can check quickly on what has developed or respond quickly, which people really like, or build your audience, using great tools like HootSuite and other things. This is, for example, I mean, just to see the power of the LinkedIn network, right? Again, these are bullshit numbers, but there is a purpose in numbers as well, but not on a top level, right? 2,400 connections give me 2 degrees away, 612,000 people, 3 degrees, 12 million people, right? So if I'm looking for the CEO of Sony Music in Japan, I can find him here in 2 clicks. And somebody from my network will make an intro for me to the guy in Japan, right? Because we have a second-degree connection. So all I need is an introduction. So every week I'm doing about 20 introductions for others. People who have come to me and we're connected, they're saying, can you hook me up with the guy at Google? And so if I like the guy, I say, okay, sure, I'll do it. And I send a message to the guy saying, here's a cool guy, you should talk to him. If I don't, I decline, because I don't see a purpose, But it's a very, very powerful tool. And I can tell you the numbers of connections in terms of the quality is in direct relationship with your income. The more higher powerful connections, it depends, of course, what you do, right? If you need that or not, right? But if you need an audience, you have to build the audience. Right? So meaningful connections, not number connections. Right? So there's about 500 Berklee people in my network here. Right? And many of them I've never met, or I've met them here sort of once or so, but we're not friends or anything. But we help each other. So it's a process of where that is actually formalized using LinkedIn. Right? Very, very powerful mechanism. Barack Obama is on LinkedIn. I've asked him to connect with me, but he refused, so I don't know why that is. But anyway, he's busy, I guess. Okay, so this is a crucial slide, right? Because whenever we talk about doing what's called social media, which again is a bad name, really what we're talking about is opening up. That's the definition of social media, right? Whenever I do this, people are saying, oh, I'm so damn busy. I don't even have time to talk to my wife. Yeah. So how am I going to do this? Talk to strangers, right? Well, the answer is this thing is part of your marketing effort, right? It's part of your branding effort. Without a brand, you're dead. Right? If you don't have a brand, no matter what it is that you do, if a cab driver has a brand these days, right? Because he has a limousine service or something, right? I mean, everybody has a brand of some sort. As a musician, you definitely have a brand, right? So the question is, how do you do this? You know, if you're looking at these claims coming in all different directions, you're supposed to be an e-commerce expert and read lots of stuff and know everything and know everybody. Right? So how do you deal with this? And that's one of the questions I want to answer. You know, so I use certain tools of choice: Typepad for blogging, HootSuite, mobile phones, apps, and so on. This is sort of my stuff that I use all the time. And basically what I do with these things, and you can again download the PDF to see the list here, it's productivity tools. Right? I'm not obsessed with doing this just for the purpose of doing it, but to solve the job at hand. Right? So when I'm in the taxi somewhere and I get a request for speaking or helping a company on Facebook, I can respond using my iPhone app just like that in 2 seconds, whether I'm in Korea or here, makes no difference. Right? But it creates a process of liquidity. Right? And that's very important also for people to be able to find you. And again, all these things, of course, are moving to the mobile. Right? So just as a reminder, okay, because a lot of people are saying, of course, that branding is essentially just sort of lying, because in a way you brand yourself, right? So you're talking about yourself, which means that you don't have a real reason. But basically, I think merit is where it all starts. You know, in fact, I think we're living in a world of meritocracy, which is the tyranny of merit, you could say. Right? If you knew that I sucked as a speaker, or that my book sucked, you would not turn up for this thing, right? I mean, who is going to actually not look up a person when they're going to spend time watching them? Or, I mean, basically the web creates this huge amount of transparency where you can find out all you want about me before I turn up. Right? And you know that I have merit that merits your hour sitting here before you turn up. Right? And that's happening to everyone now. Whether you sell groceries or make shoes or a musician, people can find out if you're worth the time and the money. Right? And this is where it all starts. So if you don't have merit, you have to get that first, right? I mean, clearly, you know, that's where the whole thing starts, right? If you use social media to promote or market something that you do and it's not really good, you'll be hammered. Right? So don't say anything on Facebook that you want to eventually erase because it was stupid. Right? Or don't connect with bad people on LinkedIn, or don't tweet company secrets, and those kind of things, right? Because there's not much merit in it. Right? So again, I spoke at the Schwab conference, you know, the Schwab Financial Advisors, yesterday here in Boston, and they had the motto of the event was called "Be Bold," right? Which is kind of interesting for financial advisors here. So I turned it around and said, okay, be bold but not stupid, because you can be bold and go forward, right? But you do have to think about what everything you put up on your profile stays forever. You can ask Google to erase your record, and they'll do it. But by the time they've erased it, there's lots of other companies that have copied it. Right? So it's not a process of reversibility. Right? It's very important to keep in mind, again, what's your brand? What do you stand for? Right? You can change your brand, but it's always an effort to do this. This is the other big problem. You would not believe how many great musicians, producers, writers, creative people I have met over the year who do exactly this. They say, sushi is cold dead fish. Right? I mean, if you want somebody to come and eat sushi, you're not going to say, would you like to eat some cold dead fish that smells funny? Right? How many artists are doing this? Right? Basically saying they have great stuff, but the way that they call it is nobody's going to pay any attention to it. Right? So this goes for stuff like domain names, your name of your company, right? The way that you present yourself. I mean, you have to increase the perception that this is the best possible thing you can possibly have. Right? That starts with how you call it. Right? This is a huge problem because basically people on the web can see through that stuff and they get the feeling that something not really worth their time and they won't pay any attention. Right? So that's very important, finding a way to market yourself as something really valuable. Right? Now there's a great guy called Seth Godin who's sort of a marketing guru from New York. He's written like a dozen books on it. He has a book called The Idea Virus, which you can download for free. Talks about how ideas spread, right? And what we have on the internet now is basically we're moving this idea, this era, from this era of physical economy, of selling CDs, for example, to this, to what's called tribal relationships. I mean, of course, music has always been organized in tribes because it's about styles and genres and bands, right? But now the entire world is turning into tribes, because if you see, for example, what's happening on Facebook is that there's like 50,000 groups of various tribes, you know, political tribes and therapists and hypno people and people from Hawaii and whatever you've got, right? Different tribes. So when you are successful in creating a tribe or being part of one, that becomes a huge magnifying glass for your work, right? Because basically the tribe sort of aggregates the audience for you. So you can't really, it was cut off in the end, but the number is like this, quite simple. You need 150 tribe members. That's sort of proven in sociological terms, that's a good number. So for a band, if you've got 150 people who are members of your tribe, right? People who are supporting you, coming to the gig or buy your tickets, who are fans, who know you, you know them, right? You get them to aggregate more people than what Kevin Kelly calls 1,000 real fans. Okay. When you've got 1,000 real fans who are connected to others, you can make a business out of it. That's sort of the rule of thumb. Okay. You need 1,000 real fans. Okay. And then you get them to aggregate business for you. This here is a video of my Twitter feed. People talking about me on Twitter. These are my tribes. So I'm talking about what I do on Twitter without me doing anything. I mean, I'm not paying any of them to do this. So they're talking about because I have this relationship with them that makes them promote me inadvertently, right? And that's really what you want. You want people to send your YouTube videos to others because that's the best way of marketing. Right? The tribal relationship, that's a bit hard to see that. So here's a couple of facts. Social websites are officially more popular than porn, which is quite an achievement. You know, because on the internet, porn has been the biggest business ever since the first day. In fact, there's lots of stuff to learn about porn in music, which I won't get into. But that's huge, right? So what that means now is not only is that bigger than porn, but also social networks are now the biggest websites in the world in terms of time spent. Right? Facebook has 520 million users. 10.6 billion minutes spent a day on Facebook. Okay. So if you don't use Facebook as a marketing platform or as a presentation platform, what you do, you're missing the boat, right? Because that's where a lot of the action happens. Look at these numbers: YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, demand media. Can't see the numbers, so I'm going to skip them. Just for fun, Facebook versus MySpace, right? MySpace is the blue line that goes away. What happened here? Well, really quite simple. MySpace was sold to Rupert Murdoch. And they said, we want to make money. Right? So they turned the dynamic engine of how people talked and how they called conversation into an engine for money, which is still working amazingly enough. It's still there and making some money, but it's no longer what it was. Right? And let's hope it doesn't happen the same with Facebook, but I doubt it. Twitter versus New York Times in the Wall Street Journal. Right? The blue line is Twitter. More traffic on Twitter than the New York Times, which is the oldest media company in the world. If you get people to talk about you on Twitter and on other social networks, and of course there's many, for example, in Asia, like Orkut or QQ, Mixi, and so on, right? You get people to talk about you, you will find an audience. Is there a question?
It's pretty interesting that the hidden stories of the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal have not gone down on that slide. They sort of managed to...
Well, it's different people, you know, different people, but we're already at that point to where I met Biz Stone yesterday, the guy, founder of Twitter, who talked about what they, I mean, basically Twitter is becoming what's called the Twitter News Network, TNN, right? Twitter is the next CNN, we could say already, right? Clearly, and how are you ever going to get on CNN with your band or as a songwriter? Not a chance, right? You would ever get, but you can be on Twitter, right? It's a decentralized audience, of course, that's the difference. And Twitter will add, by the way, video and audio, music and audio, right? And video as well in the future. So In Europe, we're already talking about Facebook as the biggest broadcaster. Now, Facebook is bigger than NBC, CBS, the BBC, and all of those guys together in terms of total time spent. Already every day, 360 million videos are watched on Facebook. So there's a platform that you should use. I mean, clearly, Facebook is not going away. They may have issues about all kinds of things, and of course, they're from Silicon Valley, so they see the world in a particular way. But their infrastructure, right? Facebook is like the highway. Right? It's like water. Right? Let's hope they don't mess it up, but I think we can be hopeful. So traps to avoid for social media. When you have a blog or a Twitter feed, don't say buy this now. Okay? Don't hype your products. Don't sell. Right? People will buy your stuff anyway if they like you. You just have to lead them to where it is. Right? So sometimes I will make a tweet and I'll say, look, here's my bookstore. You want a free book, you can ping me and I'll send you a PDF if you don't want to go to the bookstore. But I just want you to know where it is. But I'm not pitching all the time and yelling about buying stuff. Right? It's basically the process of information. This sort of thing is just not working on the web. Right? People will buy your stuff when they see value. They always do. So that's a little bit of a warning. In terms of business, I think it's the funnel model is the most powerful model. How can you get people in on the top of the funnel and attract them with what you do, and then suck them down the funnels that will give you money? That's true for a business just as well as is for individuals. Right? Find a way to get people into the funnel, right? Essentially the drug dealer's model, you could say. You give them something for free, and then they become sort of hooked on what you give them. Right? Which is, of course, the music model to begin with. Right? Not the drugs, but the rest of it. So this is also the Twitter paradigm, which is a very powerful paradigm when you think about it. This paradigm doesn't say buy from me. Right? It says follow me, like me, so parenthesis, right? Eventually you end up buying anyway. That's the process. I mean, that's also not new. But now on Twitter also we have an extreme embodiment of this paradigm, right? Which was always been true. Grateful Dead, for example, had the same model. Right? And they're the richest band by far, ever, right? In terms of the touring revenues, right? Grateful Dead led the US industry for 22 years or something in terms of touring revenues. Right? That was essentially their model. And then there's the magnetism model, right? What is it about you as a writer or as a sound engineer or a publisher or whatever you do? Do you have a magnetic brand? Well, is there some reason why people should come to you rather than to the next guy? Is there something that stands out about your personality? Magnetism is the key. Of course, that's quite clear from music itself, but Kevin Kelly, who is the former editor of Wired and a really smart guy, he says something quite daring 10 years ago, right? Wherever attention flows, money will follow. That's, you have to first believe that before you can do that, right? This is a tough mission, of course. You could easily argue, if you got 5 million views on YouTube, where's the money there? There's no money in YouTube, right? You're not getting paid for 5 million views, even if you have 5 million views, right? But the brand that you have from 5 million people or views, aggregate, you can do something with that brand. Nobody pays for the views on YouTube yet. They will eventually. That's definitely coming. But having that much attention, the problem is that right now we don't really know how we convert. Right? We may have an audience, we don't know how to get the money from them. Right? That process is being looked at right now. For example, on my mobile app, Media Futurist, I get about 2,500 people or so using my app. It's free, and I debated for a long time whether it should be free or not, right? But it is, right? Turns out the most powerful part of the app is people saying when they're in the taxi, checking where I am, to see if they can talk to me about some other work. That's the most powerful part of the tool. Right? Something I never thought of. And that's how it has monetized. It has given me tens of thousands of dollars of business through the free app. It has nothing to do with what I actually do on the app. Right? But it's a tool of development and of meeting. So we can learn from magnetic brands. Apple. What can we learn from magnetic brands from Apple? Well, Apple is clearly, Steve Jobs is a benevolent dictator, right? He loves control, and his devices are full of control. I use all of them. Right? The key with this is what he does, people love. Right? There's a cult about Mac products. Right? Why do they do that? Because he carefully curates every step, what the color looks like, and the button, and he's got the whole thing completely wrapped up, and I just buy it. Okay, it's very expensive, but I know what I'm getting. Right? I love the Apple brand because of that. He gives me no choices whatsoever. Right? I mean, it's the opposite of what I usually love, right? But he has a magnetic brand because that's what he sticks to. You can bet that it's going to be the same way, right? He's not going to disappoint you and say, okay, next thing is really shit that he dishes up, even though he has made mistakes. But that's a magnetic brand. Zappos. You guys know Zappos, online shoe store, right? Sold to Amazon is the wrong number, $450 million. Zappos will, if you call Zappos, the hotline, I tried it in fact because I wanted to see if it was true. You order something on Zappos, and the CEO is a really great guy, Tony. He does a lot of really interesting stuff on the web. Take a look. You can call Zappos and tell them about your marriage problems on the customer service hotline. They'll stay as long as you want to talk to them. They'll keep on talking to you. Right? And you can call them within 60 days of after you got the shoes, after you've been wearing them for 60 days, and return them, and they'll take them. Right? They have such extreme customer service that every single person just absolutely is crazy about Zappos, and Amazon bought them after a year and a half for $450 million. Right? The most important thing that he says, deliver happiness. Harley Davidson. They have a website that serves the purpose not at all of selling, but of Harley Davidson owners exchanging information of trip advice. For example, where they should be going, what they should carry, what the cool places to go to are. That's what they do there. It's a Harley Davidson community. Right? That's how they do it. Kodak, of course, Southwest Airlines, Virgin. Those are magnetic brands, 9 Inch Nails. Right? I mean, that's how they make money, right? By creating magnetism that we like. Right? So, key question. I thought it was an interesting record cover, this sort of showing what your brand is. It's not quite clear what the brand of these people is, but what is your brand? That is the key question. Before you do anything on Facebook or Twitter or blog or whatever, you have to figure out what do you stand for? What are the keywords? Best producer, best singer, fastest guitar player, whatever. You have to figure out what your brand is first. I'm going to skip this one because we don't really need to go through that. The other thing that's becoming more important because of the internet, it used to be just important to be a director, which means to be very good at what you do. Now it's becoming more important to be a connector, to connect others, because they return the favor. So rather than the monolithic system that I showed in the beginning, the broadcast tower, where you are the center of the universe, now it's becoming much more important also to connect others, because they return the favor. It's a business relationship. Right? That's becoming a very important part. So if you have a company or a label or whatever, this is a hotel I stayed in California called the Aqua Hotel. And I emailed them back saying, there was a couple of things I didn't like, right? And so I get this email back from these people from a guy who's called the cultural ambassador of this hotel, right? And this is the person who's taking care of these conversations with people who have issues, right? So as a company, you now have to have a digital ambassador, or several people who speak for you, who run the conversation. That's what's most important about, for example, airlines or record labels. Of course, now go in the same direction. Do you have those things on your web page? The sharing thing. Can people share your web page? This takes your program about 20 seconds to put in, as far as the code is concerned. Eh? So that's sort of a key question. The other key question, like if, for example, if you run a website, do you allow people to connect and log in with Facebook? Or do you make them log in and register themselves? Right? This is like a 5-year-old problem where you have a website and you say you want to find out more than log in, and you have to fill out this form and stuff, right? Now this code from Facebook allows you to log in with your Facebook name and bring all your information from Facebook into the new website. Right? That's basically taken off all over the place using Twitter and Facebook, what's called a social login. So a bottom line for this stuff is basically, I think social media is what's called in marketing language CRM, customer relationship management. Well, that's one of the things that it is. Of course, it's also other things, right? But it's essentially a way of keeping track of your relationships with other people. So you should look at it in a professional life, primarily in this direction of saying you're maintaining relationships, some of them being private, other ones being business, or sometimes you don't know which one, right? That always happens a lot, but that's really the purpose of all these things, right? Finally, as a sort of another way of looking at the same thing is like Chris Anderson, who wrote a book called Free, says the issue is not that people won't pay, right? They don't see the value. For some reason, they're not going to pay you because they don't see the value in what you do. Right? So the mission is not to convince them that there is value when they're not seeing it, or to force them to pay, regardless of value, which is the music industry's mantra the last 10 years, but to generate value and then get paid. Right? I mean, look at, for example, if you look around the internet, people are paying for content everywhere on the internet. They're paying for apps, right? The average iPhone user is $4.80 a month. 80 cents you pay per month, right? That's all content, right? Do you guys know Farmville on Facebook? I hope you don't know Farmville, but it's a social game. You can buy a tractor to drive around your Facebook farm, right? $340 million last year. Right? People pay to send virtual flowers. People pay to for dating, of course, $50 a year. Match.com, $300 million a year. Right? That's all content. So people have to have a reason to pay. That is the key. Right? You have to give them a reason to pay. What is the argument in paying, and what do you actually offer? So when the price is right and the value is there, right? Steve Jobs, quite a brilliant guy, as he says. He says basically, this is what I want to leave you with: stay hungry, stay foolish, which I think is a crucial part, right? If you're not hungry, if you don't want to connect with people to investigate things, why are you going to make money? I mean, you're already saturated. I mean, you don't really need them, right? And foolish means in the sense of saying, experiment. Of course, it's kind of odd that he would say that, but he's already reached a very high point in that equation. So, summary, again, get good at finding and being found. That is the mission, finding and being found. Okay. And that's an art. Right? You have to develop this. It's just like your own art. That's